Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you a story that goes beyond anything you've ever heard about near-death experiences. Let's meet Emerson Drake, an engineer from Portland who faced a serious infection and had a transformative experience. Not only did he encounter Jesus in another dimension, but he also received stunning revelations about humanity's future, including imminent extraterrestrial contact. Get ready, because what he saw will change the way you see life. Before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. Now, fasten your seatbelts for this extraordinary journey. My name is Emerson Drake. I'm 38 years old and an electronics engineer in Portland, Oregon. Before the event that changed my life, I led what many would consider an ordinary, balanced existence. My days were filled with work at the technology company where I have worked for over a decade, and the nights and weekends were dedicated to my family, my wife Clara and our daughter Ivy. Looking back, I realized that even though I was physically present, there was an emotional disconnection with my loved ones. I was the kind of man who prided himself on his ability to solve problems and keep everything under control. But this resulted in a certain coldness in my personal relationships. My routine was predictable: waking up early, going to the office, coming home, having dinner with the family, and repeating everything the next day. I lived on autopilot, focused on professional goals and providing material comfort for my family. I thought I was doing everything right, fulfilling my role as a husband and providing father. Yet there was an emptiness that I couldn't explain, a constant feeling that something was missing, even if I didn't know exactly what. In 2015, my life continued its normal course. I had just completed a big project at work and was preparing for a promotion. It was during this period that I needed to undergo a seemingly simple medical procedure, nothing that I was too worried about. It was just a minor surgery that was supposed to keep me in the hospital for no more than a day or two. Little did I know that this seemingly trivial event would be the catalyst for a journey that would completely transform my perception of life, death, and everything in between. What began as a medical routine became an experience that challenged everything I believed I knew about reality. This is the story of my near-death experience, a journey that took me beyond the limits of the physical world and made me question everything I thought I knew about existence. It is a story of transformation, discovery, and, above all, a new understanding of the true meaning of life and love. It all started surprisingly banally. I was in the hospital for a routine procedure, something that shouldn't pose any serious risk. I remember lying in the hospital bed, with Clara holding my hand, trying to hide her concern with a forced smile. I reassured her that I would be home soon for dinner with her and Ivy. The procedure itself was quick, and initially appeared to be a success. However, in the hours that followed, I began to feel unusually fatigued. Doctors attributed this to anesthesia and the stress of the procedure, but as the hours passed, my condition rapidly worsened. The first indication that something was terribly wrong came when I started having trouble breathing. It was like my lungs were filling with lead. Panic began to overcome me when I realized that no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get enough oxygen. Doctors and nurses sprung into action immediately. I heard words like sepsis and multiple organ failure thrown into the air. I saw the fear in Clara's eyes as she was taken away from my bed so the medical team could work. Everything started to become confusing and distant. I vaguely remember being rushed to the ICU. The overhead lights blurred over my head as I was transported through the hospital hallways. Monitors beeped, urgent voices gave orders, and I felt like I was sinking into a cold, dark ocean. At some point, I heard a doctor tell Clara that my condition was extremely serious. The words, "less than 1% chance of survival," rang in my ears like a death sentence. I wanted to scream, fight, tell everyone that I couldn't die, that I had a family to take care of, a life to live, but my body didn't respond. As my consciousness began to fade, I felt an overwhelming fear. It wasn't just the fear of death, but the fear of leaving everything unfinished. There was so much I still wanted to do, so much that I wanted to tell Clara and Ivy. I realized, in that moment of brutal clarity, how much I had wasted focusing on the wrong things. My last conscious memory was of Clara crying beside me, holding my hand and begging me to fight. I wanted to respond. I wanted to promise I would be okay, but the darkness was engulfing me. And then, just when I thought it was all over, just when I felt like I was about to give in to the darkness, something extraordinary happened. It was the beginning of a journey that would forever change my understanding of life, death, and everything that lies beyond. Suddenly, the pain and panic disappeared. It was like a switch had been turned off, and all the agony I was feeling just melted away. At that moment, I experienced a sensation that I will never forget, that of floating outside of my own body. It was like I was watching a scene from a movie, but the main character was myself. I saw my body lying on the ICU bed, pale and still, connected to a series of tubes and machines. Doctors and nurses moved frantically around me, desperately trying to save my life. The most surprising thing was that I could see and hear everything with a clarity I had never experienced before. Every detail was sharp, every sound was crystal clear. I heard the doctor say that my blood CO2 levels had reached 200, an alarmingly high number. I knew, somehow, that normal was below 35. Clara was in a corner of the room, hugged by a nurse, sobbing silently. I wanted to comfort her, tell her I was okay, that I wasn't in pain anymore, but there was no way to communicate. It was frustrating and fascinating at the same time. As I floated above the scene, I began to notice something even more extraordinary. The ICU room began to lose its solidity. The walls seemed to dissolve, revealing a vast, luminous space beyond. It was as if the physical world was just a thin layer of reality, and now I was seeing beyond it. In this new space, I realized I was connected to everything around me. I could feel the vital energy pulsing through every being in the hospital, the patients, the doctors, even the plants in the reception area. It was an intricate web of life and consciousness, something I never imagined existed. As I moved further away from my physical body, I felt a deep peace wash over me. There was no fear, there was no worry. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free. Free from the limitations of the body, free from the worldly concerns that once seemed so important. It was at that moment that I realized that even in a comatose state, even with my body fighting to survive, I was more aware and alert than I had ever been. It was as if my senses had been magnified infinitely. I could perceive things that were previously beyond my understanding. As I contemplated this new reality, I noticed that I was not alone in this vast space. There were presences around me, entities that seemed to be watching me, waiting. I didn't feel afraid of them. On the contrary, there was a feeling of familiarity, as if I knew them from somewhere, from some long-forgotten time. It was then that I understood my journey was just beginning. What I had experienced thus far was just the prelude to something much greater, something that would fundamentally change my understanding of existence. I was about to embark on a journey through dimensions I didn't even know existed, guided by beings who seemed to understand the secrets of the universe. While floating in this infinite space, 3 entities approached me. I cannot say that I saw them with my physical eyes, as I no longer had a physical body. It was more like I perceived them with my entire being. The first entity took on a form that I can only describe as masculine, although masculine is too limited a term for what I experienced. This presence radiated an ancient, profound wisdom. His eyes, if I can call it that, seemed to contain the knowledge of ages. When he communicated with me, it was not through words, but through thoughts and sensations that flowed directly into my consciousness. The second entity was feminine in essence. She exuded such pure and intense compassion that I felt instantly welcomed and loved unconditionally. It was as if all the love that ever existed in the universe was concentrated in this presence. His voice was like soft music that soothed my soul. The third entity was the one that surprised me the most. She transformed before my eyes, taking the form of my daughter, Ivy. But it wasn't exactly Ivy as I knew her. It was like an older, wiser version of her, emanating a strength and love that touched me deeply. I understood that this entity had chosen this form to give me strength, to remind me of what I had to return to. These three entities surrounded me, forming a circle of light and energy. They explained it to me, not with words, but with impressions and images, which were there to guide me through this experience. I was told that I was at a pivotal moment in my existence, a turning point that would determine not only the course of my current life, but also my spiritual growth in a much broader sense. They showed me that life as I knew it was just a small part of a much larger journey. They explained to me that every choice we make, every interaction we have, contributes to the fabric of the universe in ways we cannot fully understand while we are trapped in the limited perception of physical reality. The male guide showed me visions of past and future civilizations, revealing how each era of humanity contributes to a collective evolution of consciousness. The feminine entity enveloped me in an energetic embrace that healed emotional wounds I didn't even know I had, and the presence that resembled my daughter reminded me of the transformative power of unconditional love. Together, these guides prepared me for what was to come. They explained that we would revisit moments in my life, not just to relive the past, but to deeply understand the impact of each choice, each word, each thought. I was told I would see alternative versions of myself, possibilities that unfolded into other realities based on different choices. I was told this journey would not be easy, that I would face truths about myself that might be difficult to accept, but I was assured that this process was necessary for my growth and evolution. As I prepared for this life review, I felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Part of me was eager to understand more about my existence, to see beyond the veils that normally obscure our perception. Another part was nervous, fearing what I might discover about myself. But the guides assured me that they would be with me every step of the way, that their role was not to judge, but to illuminate and support. With his comforting presence by my side, I felt ready to delve into the depths of my own existence, prepared to face whatever came next on this extraordinary journey beyond life as I knew it. Guided by the three entities, I began to revisit crucial moments in my life. But this wasn't a simple memory or a movie playing before my eyes. It was as if I was reliving every moment, not just as an observer, but feeling every emotion and thought again, with an overwhelming intensity. The first moment I revisited was a fight I had with my father when I was a teenager. At the time, I saw him as an inflexible tyrant, unable to understand my dreams and aspirations. Reliving the scene, I could feel my own anger and frustration. But this time, something was different. I could also feel my father's emotions, his fear of seeing me make the same mistakes he had made, his deep love masked by a facade of toughness. This new perspective made me realize how much time and energy I had wasted resenting my father, instead of trying to understand him. I was then taken to a recent moment with Clara. It was an ordinary night. She was telling me about her day at work, and I was a little distracted, checking emails on my phone. At the time, I didn't think much about it. But now, reliving the scene, I could feel Clara's pain and disappointment. I could see in her eyes the longing for connection, to be truly heard and valued. I realized how many opportunities like this I had missed. Precious moments of intimacy and mutual understanding that I had missed because I was always too busy. The guides then showed me a sequence of decisions I made at work. I found myself choosing to stay late at the office over going to Ivy's dance recital, prioritizing an important meeting over my wedding anniversary with Clara, always putting professional success above the emotional needs of my family. Each choice, viewed in isolation, seemed justifiable at the time. But now, seeing the pattern that was forming, I felt a deep sadness and regret. The most surprising thing about this life review was seeing alternative versions of myself in parallel realities. I saw an Emerson who chose a different career, more aligned with his passion for music. This Emerson seemed less stressed, more fulfilled, even though he faced financial challenges. I saw another Emerson who prioritized his family, working fewer hours and being more present at home. The emotional connection he had with Clara and Ivy was palpable, something that made me feel a pang of envy and remorse. The guides explained to me that life is not a linear sequence of events, but a complex matrix of possibilities. Every decision we make creates new realities, new paths. I understood that there is no single predetermined destiny, but an infinite field of potential that we shape with our choices at each moment. This life review was not just about regret or guilt. It was an opportunity for deep understanding. I saw how each experience, each interaction, contributed to my growth. Even the moments I considered mistakes had their purpose, offering valuable lessons. The guides showed me that the true purpose of this review was not to make me feel bad about my past choices, but to help me understand the power and responsibility we have in every moment of our lives. Every word, every action, every thought has an impact on the fabric of reality, not just our own lives, but the lives of those around us and, in some ways, the universe as a whole. At the end of this part of the journey, I felt emotionally drained, but also deeply transformed. I had a new appreciation for the interconnectedness of all things, the importance of relationships and genuine love. I understood that true wealth is not in professional success or material possessions, but in the depth of our connections and the authenticity with which we live each moment. The guides assured me that this understanding was just the beginning. There was more to see, more to learn. They prepared me for the next stage of my journey, an encounter that would fundamentally change my perception of existence and the divine. After the intense life review, I felt exhausted but curiously invigorated. The guides gently led me to what felt like the next stage of my journey. The space around me began to change, becoming clearer and more ethereal. It was then that one of the guides, the entity exuding ancient wisdom, instructed me to reach out. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect. But something inside me, a deep trust I didn't know I possessed, made me obey. The instant I extended my hand, a sphere of pure, radiant light appeared before me. It was a light unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was not blinding, but at the same time it was infinitely bright. Within that sphere, a form began to materialize. To my surprise and astonishment, I recognized the figure that was forming. It was Jesus. Not the Jesus of religious paintings or Hollywood films, but a presence that emanated such deep peace and love that I felt completely enveloped and transformed. What struck me was not an imposing or intimidating figure, but rather the simplicity and accessibility of this presence. Jesus' eyes, if I can call them eyes, seemed to contain all the love and compassion in the universe. There was no judgment, just unconditional acceptance. At that moment, I understood that I was facing something that transcended any human concept of divinity. He was not just the Jesus of the Christian tradition, but a manifestation of universal divine love, recognizable to me in this familiar form. There were no words exchanged, at least not in the conventional sense. Instead, I experienced direct soul-to-soul communication. I felt flooded with a knowledge and understanding that went beyond anything I could articulate with human words. In this silent exchange, I received profound insights into the nature of the universe, into the purpose of existence, into the role of love as the most powerful and fundamental force in creation. I understood that all religions and belief systems are just human attempts to understand and express this universal truth. Suddenly, a beam of intense light flashed across the scene. It was as if the entire cosmos lit up for a brief moment. Instinctively, I knew that this event was connected in some way to my situation in the hospital. It was as if this ray of light was a sign, a direct connection between this transcendental experience and my physical reality. At that moment, I felt a renewal of vital energy flowing through me. It was as if every cell of my being was being recharged, revitalized. I understood that this moment was intrinsically linked to my imminent recovery in the hospital. As the intensity of the moment diminished, the figure of Jesus began to dissolve back into the sphere of light. But before I completely disappeared, I felt one last wave of unconditional love wash over me. It was like I received a silent blessing, an affirmation that no matter what happened next, I was eternally connected to this divine source of love and understanding. The guides reappeared at my side, their faces reflecting a deep reverence for what had just happened. They explained to me that this meeting was a crucial milestone in my spiritual journey, not just in this life, but in a much broader context of existence. As I took in everything I had experienced, I felt a profound transformation within me. My perspective on life, death, spirituality, and the purpose of existence had fundamentally changed. I knew that if I survived this near-death experience, nothing would be the same. I would carry with me this new understanding, this new sense of purpose and connection with the divine. The guides indicated to me that our journey was not yet over. There was more to see, more to learn. With a mixture of anticipation and awe, I prepared for the next stage of this extraordinary spiritual odyssey. After the transcendental encounter with the figure of Jesus, I thought that nothing could surprise me anymore. I was mistaken. The guides led me through what I can only describe as an interdimensional corridor of light. It was as if we were traveling through the very fabric of space-time. Suddenly I found myself in a completely different place. It was a planet, but unlike anything I could have imagined. The sky was a soft lavender hue, with twin suns shining on the horizon. The landscape was breathtaking, floating mountains covered in luminescent vegetation, deep blue oceans that seemed to pulse with life, and crystalline structures that rose majestically, reflecting the sun's light in thousands of colors. But the most surprising thing was the inhabitants of this world, beings with translucent skin that seemed to radiate light from within. Their shapes were vaguely humanoid, but taller and slender. The most fascinating thing was their auras, colorful energy fields that surrounded them, changing color and intensity according to their emotions and thoughts. I observed, in amazement, the routine of these beings. They moved with a grace and fluidity that seemed to defy gravity. Their communication was primarily telepathic, with occasional melodious sounds that sounded more like music than speech. The guide who had taken the form of my daughter explained that these beings were a very ancient and advanced civilization. They had transcended many of the physical and emotional limitations that we humans still face. They lived in perfect harmony with each other and the environment around them. The most surprising thing was discovering that these beings not only knew about the existence of humanity, but observed us with a mix of curiosity and compassion. They understood our conflicts, our struggles, our unfulfilled potential. However, they had a strict policy of non-direct interference, believing that each civilization should evolve at its own pace. One of the beings approached me. Although there was no physical contact, I felt a wave of loving, understanding energy wash over me. Through a form of communication that went beyond words, this being shared with me visions of the interconnectedness of all life forms in the universe. I saw how every thought, every action, every choice we make creates ripples that spread throughout the cosmos. I understood that love is not just a feeling, but a fundamental force in the universe, as real and powerful as gravity or electromagnetism. These beings showed me that evolution is not just physical or technological, but mainly spiritual and emotional. They had learned to channel and utilize the power of love and compassion in ways that would seem miraculous to us. I was introduced to concepts of quantum physics and spirituality that challenged my previous understanding of the universe. I learned about the multidimensional nature of reality, about how time and space are much more flexible than we imagine, and about how consciousness plays a fundamental role in shaping reality. The beings on this planet have shown me visions of humanity's future potential. I saw versions of our world where we had overcome our differences, where we lived in harmony with nature and each other. But I also saw dark futures, the results of choices based on fear and greed. I understood that we were at a critical point in our evolution as a species. The choices we make now would determine not only our future on Earth, but our place in the larger cosmic community. Before leaving, I received one last message from these beings of light: the importance of cultivating love, compassion, and awareness in our daily lives. They assured me that although the challenges we face may seem insurmountable, we have within us the potential for profound and positive transformation. I left that planet with a mixture of wonder, hope, and a renewed sense of responsibility. I knew that if I survived this experience, I would have a mission to share these lessons with the world. The guides indicated to me that our journey was coming to an end, but there was one last revelation waiting for me. something that would forever change my understanding of knowledge and universal history. After leaving the planet of light beings, the guides led me through what seemed to be a vortex of pure energy. When we emerged, I found myself in a space that defied description based on earthly concepts. It was as if we were floating in a vast field of cosmic energy, surrounded by lights and colors that pulsed with life and consciousness. It was then that one of the guides, the one who emanated ancient wisdom, explained to me that we were about to access the Akashic records. He described it as a kind of cosmic library, a repository of all the information and experiences that ever were, are, or will be in the universe. Suddenly, I was immersed in an overwhelming holographic experience. I was not just observing events, but experiencing them firsthand. It was as if every atom of my being was tuned to the frequency of the universe itself. First, I revisited moments from my own life, but this time, the experience was much deeper than the previous life review. I could see not only my actions and their immediate consequences, but the far-reaching impact each choice had on the fabric of reality. I saw how a simple act of kindness I performed years ago created a chain of positive events that continued to unfold. I was then transported through different eras and cultures. I witnessed the construction of the pyramids. I saw the rise and fall of long-forgotten civilizations. I experienced life through the eyes of historical figures. I felt the determination of Martin Luther King Jr. during his "I Have a Dream" speech, the compassion of Mother Teresa as she cared for those in need in Calcutta. But the Akashic records were not limited to just the past. I received glimpses of the future, not a fixed future, but a kaleidoscope of possibilities based on humanity's collective choices. I saw a future where humanity had achieved peace and harmony by exploring the stars. But I also saw dark futures, where our species succumbed to war and environmental destruction. One vision in particular stood out: imminent contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. It was not a hostile invasion as portrayed in science fiction films, but an encounter that would fundamentally change our understanding of the universe and our place in it. I understood that this event would be a catalyst for a great transformation in human consciousness. The guides explained to me that the purpose of showing these visions was not to predict the future, but to make me understand the immense power and responsibility we have in shaping our collective destiny. Every thought, every action, every choice we make contributes to the field of possibilities that defines our future. As I delved deeper into the Akashic records, I began to understand concepts that go beyond normal human understanding. I saw how time, instead of being linear, is actually a multidimensional construct. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously, interconnected in ways that our three-dimensional minds can barely begin to comprehend. I learned about the cyclical nature of the universe, about how galaxies, solar systems, and even universes are born, evolve, and eventually transform, only to be reborn in new forms. I saw the evolution of consciousness, not just on a human scale, but on a cosmic scale. A particularly profound revelation was understanding the true meaning of karma. It was not a system of punishment and reward, as it is often interpreted, but rather a cosmic law of balance and learning. Every action, every thought, creates a wave of energy that eventually returns to its point of origin, offering opportunities for growth and evolution. The guides showed me how all souls are interconnected, part of a great cosmic tapestry. I saw how the experiences of one life influence not only that soul's future lives, but also those of every other soul with whom it interacts. As I absorbed all this knowledge, I felt overwhelmed. It was as if my consciousness was expanding to accommodate an entire universe of information. The guides assured me that although I could not consciously retain every detail of this experience, the essential knowledge would remain with me, influencing my future choices and perceptions. Before we left the Akashic records, I received one last vision. It was me, back on Earth, sharing what I had learned. I found myself helping others awaken to a deeper understanding of reality, contributing to a collective shift in human consciousness. The guides explained to me that this vision was not a fixed destination, but a possibility that I could choose to manifest. They emphasized that free will is one of the most precious gifts we possess, and that each of us has the power to shape not only our own destiny, but to influence the course of human evolution. When we finally emerged from the Akashic records, I felt profoundly transformed. It was as if every cell of my being vibrated with a new frequency of consciousness. I knew that if I survived this near-death experience, nothing in my life would be the same. The guides informed me that our journey was coming to an end. It was time to return to the physical world. I felt a mix of emotions: gratitude for the incredible experience I had, anxiety about how I would integrate it all into my everyday life, and a sense of renewed purpose. As we prepared for the journey home, I wondered how it would be possible to translate everything I had learned into a language that others could understand. The guides assured me that, when the time was right, the words would come. My task was not to convert everyone to my new worldview, but simply to live in accordance with the truths I had discovered, allowing my own transformation to inspire others. With one last look at the vast field of cosmic knowledge, I felt ready to return. I was eager to see my family again, to hug Clara and Ivy, and to start living my life with a new perspective and purpose. The transition back into my physical body was as sudden as it was surprising. One moment I was immersed in the vastness of the cosmos, surrounded by universal knowledge and beings of light, and the next moment, I felt myself being pulled back into physical reality with an overwhelming force. The first sensation was pain. After experiencing the freedom and peace of the spiritual realm, the limitations and sensations of the physical body were overwhelming. Every nerve felt like it was on fire. Every muscle ached. The contrast was so intense that for a moment I wished I could return to the peace of the out-of-body experience. Slowly, I began to become aware of my surroundings. The sounds came first: the rhythmic beeping of heart monitors, the soft hum of medical equipment, distant, muffled voices. Then came the distinctive hospital smell, a mixture of disinfectant and medicine that now seemed strangely alien. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt too heavy. I tried to move my fingers, my arms, anything, but my body refused to obey. It was then that I heard a familiar voice. Clara. She was talking to someone, probably a doctor, her voice shaking with emotion. "Doctor, what's going on? The monitors. They've changed," I heard Clara say. The doctor's voice responded with a tone of barely concealed surprise. "It's incredible. His vital signs are quickly stabilizing. I've never seen anything like it before." I then realized that the moment I witnessed during my experience, the ray of light that passed through the scene during my encounter with the figure of Jesus, must have coincided with this sudden improvement in my physical state. In the minutes and hours that followed, I felt my body slowly coming back to life. It was as if each cell was being reactivated, one at a time. The initial pain began to subside, replaced by a tingling sensation and then a growing strength. Finally, I managed to open my eyes. The light in the hospital room seemed blinding at first, but gradually my vision adjusted. I saw Clara beside me, her eyes red from crying, but now shining with a mixture of disbelief and joy. She held my hand, and for the first time in days, I was able to squeeze back. "Emerson," she whispered, as if she feared her voice might make me disappear. Are you really here?" I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and scratchy from the breathing tube that had been removed. I could only manage a husky whisper. "I'm here, Clara. I'm back." The doctors were perplexed by my recovery. They used words like miraculous and inexplicable. My blood CO2 levels, which had reached lethal levels, were now quickly returning to normal. Bodies that were in bankruptcy began to function again. It was like my body had been given a complete reset. In the days that followed, as I regained my strength, I struggled to process everything I had experienced. How could I begin to explain to Clara, to the doctors, to anyone, the incredible journey I had been on? How could he translate into human words the cosmic truths he had witnessed? I realized this would be a task for the rest of my life, integrating the knowledge and wisdom I gained during my near-death experience with everyday reality. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The world I knew before now seemed so limited, so focused on trivial concerns. But I also felt deep gratitude. Gratitude for having survived, for having had this unique opportunity to glimpse the secrets of the universe and return to tell the story. Gratitude for Clara, for Ivy, for every breath, every moment. While recovering in the hospital, I began to plan how I would experience my second chance. I knew that significant changes were coming. My perspective on life, on what really matters, had been fundamentally altered. And although he knew he would face challenges trying to live up to this new understanding in a world that did not yet share it, he was determined to make a difference, one day at a time. In the weeks and months following my release from the hospital, I began the journey of reintegrating into normal life. But nothing was really normal now. Every aspect of my existence had been profoundly impacted by my near-death experience. The first challenge was explaining to my family and friends what I had experienced. How to describe the indescribable? How could I convey the depth and magnitude of what I had learned? Initially, I chose to share just snippets, testing the waters to see how people would react. Clara was my greatest ally in this process. Although she couldn't fully understand what I had experienced, she saw the change in me and was open to listening. We spent many nights talking late, with her asking me questions and me trying to articulate answers that made sense in the context of our shared reality. My relationship with Ivy has also changed significantly. I now saw my daughter not just as my child, but as an old soul on a journey of her own. I began to cherish every moment with her in a new way, recognizing the depth and importance of our interactions. At work, things were more complicated. My colleagues and superiors expected me to return to Mao's normal, resuming my old routine of long hours and relentless focus on results. But I could no longer see the corporate world in the same way. The goals that once seemed so crucial now seemed trivial in comparison to the cosmic truths I had witnessed. I decided to make gradual but significant changes. I started prioritizing work-life balance, dedicating more time to my family and my personal growth. I introduced mindfulness practices into the office and began advocating for a more compassionate and mindful corporate culture. Surprisingly, these changes were received better than I expected. Many colleagues, seeing the positive transformation in me, became curious and open to new ideas. Slowly, I began to see small changes happening around me, like ripples spreading across a lake. Outside of work, I dedicated myself to learning more about spirituality, quantum physics, and consciousness. I started meditating regularly, trying to reconnect with that sense of oneness I experienced during my journey. I also started writing, documenting my experiences and insights, hoping to one day share them with a wider audience. One of the most profound changes was in my perspective on death. The fear of death, which had previously lingered in the back of my mind, had completely disappeared. I now understood death not as an end, but as a transition, a passage to another state of being. This understanding gave me a freedom and peace that I had never experienced before. As time went on, I found myself naturally attracting people who were looking for something more in life. I began sharing my story in small groups, offering guidance and support to those who were on their own spiritual journeys. I didn't see myself as a guru or a spiritual leader, but simply as someone who had a glimpse of something greater and was willing to share that experience. There were challenges, of course, moments of doubt, when the intensity of my experience seemed to fade and I wondered if it had all been real. Moments of frustration when I felt unable to live up to the truths I had learned. Moments of loneliness, when I felt like no one could really understand what I had been through. But through it all, I stayed grounded in the lessons I had learned. The importance of love and compassion, the interconnectedness of all things, the power of our choices to shape not just our lives, but the very fabric of reality. Gradually, I began to see my near-death experience not as an isolated, extraordinary event, but as the beginning of an ongoing journey of discovery and growth. Each day brought new opportunities to apply what I had learned, to grow in understanding and awareness. Looking back at the man I was before that fateful surgery, I can hardly believe the transformation that took place. The journey has not been easy, and I know I still have a lot to learn and grow, but I am deeply grateful for this second chance, for this new understanding of life and the universe. My hope now is to continue living in a way that honors the truths that have been revealed to me. Keep growing, learning and sharing, and perhaps, in some way, contribute to raising the collective consciousness of humanity, one small step at a time. Because if there's one thing I've learned on my journey beyond life, it's that each of us has a vital role to play in the great cosmic drama. Every action, every thought, every choice matters. And with love, compassion, and awareness, we can create ripples that spread across the universe, transforming not only our own lives, but the very fabric of reality. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.